Cameras live.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular board meeting for September 9th, 2020. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize that our meeting is taking place on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. And with that, we will get underway. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions, Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item NB1, Bylaw 4328, loan authorization bylaw for consideration of 3 readings, and item CR4, which is the Community Services Committee recommendations of today, 2 items that needed to be brought forward.
Great, thank you. So with those additions, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Director Smith, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. All those in favor? And none opposed. The motion carries. Ms. Legault.
The next item is the adoption of the regular board meeting minutes of July 22nd, 2020.
Thank you. If there's no errors or omissions, I'll ask for a motion to adopt those minutes. Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo and seconded by Director Morrison. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
If there's no business arising from the minutes, we're on to public input period. There are quite a number of submissions today, so I'm just going to start the timer. The first item is from Val Irwin regarding item CR3, Electoral Area Services Report number 16. I'm writing to request that you reconsider my rezoning application and allow it to proceed to the next step. During the area directors meeting on September 2nd, my rezoning application was brought forward and denied, but I believe this denial was premature and did not take into consideration the unique and mitigating aspects of my application. I'm a single mom to a 16-year-old who has a rare genetic disorder called Dravet syndrome, which is both life-altering and life-threatening. She lives at home and has 24/7 around-the-clock care by nurses and caregivers. She goes to school at Ladysmith Secondary normally with a full-time EA. She cannot walk, talk, or make purposeful movements with her hands or body. However, she is joyful, enjoys being around her people and peers. I've recently become aware that as she transitions from childhood to adulthood, she will receive more care and government assistance in a separate residence as opposed to living with a parent. Consequently, I put forward a rezoning application in March so that I could bring the second home on my property at 11224 Chemainus Road into conformity and make some upgrades to it. In order to do any substantial upgrades, I'd require a building permit. Currently, Amy's dad resides in the cottage and participates in her care. I've been working with staff on this rezoning application. I was alerted to this meeting but did not attend as I didn't believe there was anything I could add to the discussion. I was devastated to learn the next day that my application was denied. When I watched the video of the meeting, I was dismayed that my application was seemingly not given much consideration since another Saltaire residence application with quite different circumstances was considered first and denied. When they got to mine, there was little discussion and it was also denied. As a preface to my key points below, I want to emphasize that I believe it is so important, especially now in light of COVID-19, that communities and governing bodies be open to ways that people can care for their loved ones, elders, the disabled, and other extended family members on their own properties and within their own housing if they have the means to do so. Putting family members in institutions when we potentially have housing for them on our own property seems to me completely the opposite of what we should be promoting. There are some key points that were not considered in the discussion of my application. 1, my application is unique in that I am not looking to increase density. My cottage and home are both legal for use as dwellings as both pre-existed zoning bylaws. The staff report states the cottage has never received a building permit from the CVRD and is not considered a legal dwelling, whereas it is my understanding that it is legal but simply non-conforming because it predated the zoning bylaws. And arguably so is my principal dwelling, which also did not receive an original building permit as it was constructed in 1973. The principal dwelling has since had renovations and updates which were done under permit. I have a personal situation such that it would create a dramatic benefit to my daughter's quality of life to be able to live on my property but in a separate residence. Allowing the rezoning would enable me to obtain a building permit to update the cottage, making it safer and more suitable for my daughter's needs. 3, the staff report indicates a size variance is needed to increase the accessory dwelling size from 85 square meters to 99 square meters. But in fact, I am not seeking to increase the size. The cottage is already 99 meters squared, hence the variance. 4, in 2016, a rezoning was granted at 11198 Chemainus Road, close to my property, whereby the owner built a new home and was allowed to keep an existing 1,500 square foot second home in use. My application represents dramatically less impact on the community, as both of my structures are already in existence. 5, the current zoning allows a secondary suite and the cottage is just like a suite, only it is detached. 6, all of the areas in CVRD allow accessory dwelling units except Area G, and with consolidation it is likely Area G will eventually allow this. However, it will be too late for my daughter's needs as she will need to transition sooner than the consolidation of the OCP is likely to be completed. 7, Director Smith objected to the rezoning on the basis that it would be precedent-setting and was concerned that as many as 200 more future applicants may come forward. I feel this objection doesn't accurately reflect the number of properties in Saltaire that are similar to mine. It is likely much more common that applicants are seeking to build a new home while keeping an existing one. That is not my situation. Also, that objection is not in the spirit of each application to stand alone and weighed on its individual merits. It doesn't make sense that the rezoning process exists if applications are going to be denied solely on the basis that they may attract other applications. It was also stated that the community does not support my application, but this is not my understanding. Having spoken to many community members in my work as a realtor in this area, I would like the chance to prove community support for my application through a public hearing or other community forum. I believe that given my unique situation, I would have overwhelming community support for my rezoning. The next item is from the Gill family, also with respect to the Electoral Area Services CR3, item 13, regarding 10591 Whitecap Place. On September 2nd, 2020, our application for rezoning an OCP amendment for the above noted application was denied at the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting. Our family is writing this correspondence to clarify our application in hopes that the board will reconsider the decision. Our family letter to you will highlight 1, our history in the community and respect for the OCP, 2, some clarification of our application that was not made apparent at the committee meeting, 3, the specifics of our request and the amount of time and resources the family has undertaken to date, 4, the unique circumstances of our application that will not set a precedent for the community, 5, request that the application be referred to public hearing and the public, our neighbors, and the applicant will have the opportunity to express support for this application. With respect to family history in the community, our family has been using the subject property as our island home for the past 54 years. We understand the community's vision, aspiration, and values. This has been a wonderful home for us over the decades, and we'd like it to continue so. Our father, Dr. Gill, has been a prominent member of the Indo-Canadian community and a pioneer for many immigrants. He was the first medical doctor of Indian descent in the entire country. He's been awarded the Order of BC, Her Majesty the Queen's Commonwealth Medal for Community Service, and an honorary doctorate degree from UBC. Our father has also been nominated for the Order of Canada. Since retirement, Dr. Gill continues to work with underprivileged rural villagers in India with assistance from various levels of Canadian government agencies and Government of Punjab to provide modern sewage systems, clean drinking water, and other infrastructure to villagers in rural India. To date, over 28 villages with a population of 100,000 have benefited from his charitable work, garnering attention from the President of India in 2003 himself. Given the family's charitable work in the community and long history of residing part-time in the CVRD, our request for accessory dwelling approval is not based on vanity, ego, or real estate values. It is simply to allow a proper habitable dwelling on the property. The subject property and unique conditions. There's been a family dwelling on the subject property since 1966. The second floor accessory dwelling was present in the old house when purchased in 1966. The original home was constructed circa World War I. However, it has great sentimental value to the family. The rezoning application and OCP amendment highlights that our case is an exception and not the norm. On the property today, there are 2 residential dwellings. One is the original home, and the second is a newer dwelling that was meant to be an accessory dwelling but exceeds the maximum square footage. Given the fact that the main floor of the original dwelling is no longer habitable, we are simply asking for a switch of the designations for each dwelling. The newer building would now become the property's main dwelling unit, and the original dwelling would now be the accessory dwelling. If it would help the CVRD Board of Directors, there are other options we could explore, such as a Section 219 land covenant that does not permit a habitable area on the main floor of the original home. A covenant could be placed on the title that the main floor of the old house is not habitable. Municipal governments have the ability to use these covenants to bind properties with unique circumstances. Rather than refuse the application for the accessory dwelling, we are willing to explore other land use covenants to deal with your questions and concerns. Our goal as a family is quite simple. We'd like to keep the original home given its sentimental value and use the newer construction as a residence for our family to continue enjoying into the next few decades. At September 2nd, there was considerable discussion at this meeting by the Board of Directors. At one point, there was a motion to accept option 1 to proceed to public hearing. After some comments regarding procedure and process and potential public-facing concerns about precedents, the request to proceed to public hearing was denied. Unfortunately, we were unable to discuss the input from all our neighbors, which has been overwhelmingly supportive. We have now come to know our neighbors quite well over the past several years and would welcome each of them speaking to you directly, in person or in writing at a public hearing. Mr. Limshu's staff report also indicated that the internal departments and external agencies have all been supportive of our application from a technical planning perspective. We are requesting that the Board of Directors can reconsider our rezoning and OCP amendment based on the clarification in this letter. This is our second family home, and this application process has been quite stressful for us all. A land use amendment to help clean up the zoning to make it conforming to existing uses on the property would be of benefit to our family and the CVRD. If you would like to meet on-site or discuss via telephone, we'd welcome that opportunity. We trust this letter has clarified our request and can move forward to public hearing. The next item is with respect to IN2. This is from Diane French. CVRD board members, as a resident in this valley, I'm puzzled by the actions of One Cowichan and the demands to our local government. Through their email contacts, this nonprofit promotes the completion of surveys from residents that will change the results. For instance, I do not live in North Cowichan, but the survey links they provide allow me to complete and indicate where I live, or maybe I don't answer this question accurately. So the survey results cannot be construed as being an accurate measure from its own population when outsiders are allowed to possibly influence the results. In the past, I've paid $10 in compliance with the BC Societies Act requirement to obtain from One Cowichan their 2017 and 2018 year-end reports. I followed up with questions on the lack of information that this document should contain, no expense for public liability insurance. How can this be when they rented a room at Island Savings to train volunteers for the Watershed referendum and offered car rides to those unable to drive to a voting location? This group obtained a grant from NVF in 2017, a possible U.S. influence on our local politics, which is not welcomed by this resident. The next item is also on IN2, Brenda Dawn. Oversight from individuals or nonprofit groups is beneficial to all when the oversight is intended to investigate waste, fraud, abuse, and conflicts of interest, especially where local, provincial, or federal governments are concerned. When a small group of individuals or nonprofit organizations demand the right to influence decision-making and setting policy can only be described as the new trending bully culture. A petition presented to CVRD by special interest organization is useless regardless of the number of names when policy being determined affects the entire population of CVRD. Would One Cowichan demand the following if results would comply with the declared climate emergency? 1, prevent the estimated 200 to 300,000 potential tourists from visiting the valley. 2, require all school children walk, bike, or bus to school and not be driven in a fossil fuel vehicle. CVRD board members must eliminate air travel to conferences and demand only locally grown food to be consumed at CVRD meetings. As ridiculous as the above sounds, so do some of their current demands and expectations. I trust CVRD board members will give One Cowichan's letter the attention it deserves and disregard the pressure tactics of such a small special interest group. The next item is from John Walker, submitted originally as a letter to the editor to the Cowichan Valley Citizen and requested to be added to public input period. And it reads, why did the CVRD fold to One Cowichan's demands to declare a climate emergency in this area when no such emergency exists? Now, before One Cowichan starts calling me all kinds of nasty names for stating the facts, then perhaps they can explain to the public exactly why there is an existing emergency in the CVRD area. I think this is a fair question, as the climate in the area has been excellent for the past few years, and especially so in the summers with very few forest fires, which One Cowichan contributes to climate change. You see, folks, in this area, the greenhouse effect doesn't seem to be working in favor of One Cowichan, so they're now pointing the finger out of town to devastating fires in Australia, massive flooding in China, India, and Bangladesh, record high temperatures, and the list goes on. Correct, however, not in the Cowichan Valley. Furthermore, what scientific research and resulting evidence does this group have that suggests those out-of-town conditions are the result of a greenhouse effect caused by the burning of fossil fuel, i.e. climate change, and not meteorology, atmospheric conditions? It's one thing to pressure the CVRD to declare a climate emergency, but yet another for the CVRD to be using our tax dollars to satisfy One Cowichan upcoming demands related to such a declaration. Perhaps the CVRD should be a little more demanding before folding to any group unless they can provide scientific evidence to support their cause. The next item is from Perry Foster of North Cowichan. Dear Board, like many residents in the Cowichan Valley, I'm concerned about the impact of the One Cowichan Educational Society upon our community. This group shares common directorship personnel philosophy with the Cowichan Valley Transition Group that functions with others under the umbrella of the Global Transition Network and its guidelines. There appear to be many tentacles of this network in our community. The concern is that not only does this group appear to be guided by an influence external to our valley, it has superimposed itself as a forceful voice for many of us taxpayers without our knowledge or consent. This is unacceptable. The Global Transition Network derives from the UK with initial funding mainly from a large anonymous donor and the Tudor Trust Foundation. The rules it sets out for transition towns are to be followed in order for them to remain in good standing. There are many commitments the towns are expected to abide by. One example of the hold this organization has on towns is exemplified in the wording in the Transitions Initiative Primer being, once you can demonstrate to us at Transition Network that you're on board with these and ready to set off on your transition journey, you open the door to all sorts of wonderful support, guidance, materials, web space, training, networking opportunities, and coordinated funding initiatives. A few links are provided in the email to supporting documents. And one Cowichan's request for a declaration of a climate emergency should be denied as it does not appear appropriate for this group to lobby our local government due to the elements revealed above. Also, the request should be denied because a declaration of climate emergency would initiate a cascade of requirements tied to the UN Initiative on Climate and Development that would add to the already exorbitant tax burden of local citizens. Generally, once an emergency is officially declared, it must be acted on. In addition, I believe an investigation should be undertaken into this group's seemingly covert political activities in the valley. And Mr. Chair, we're over 15 minutes and we have 2 more submissions. Would you like me to continue? Your microphone's muted.
Oh, I muted myself instead of unmuting. Thanks, both of Director Haim and Ms. Legault. It would be, I believe it's a 2/3 majority to continue, or is it just a simple majority? I believe that's Director Wilson moving that we continue with the final submission, seconded by Director McGonigal. All right, that's I don't believe we discussed that motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next submission is from Diane Moen from North Cowichan. I'm asking you, the board members of the CVRD, by way of this letter, to please deny the request made by One Cowichan that the CVRD make an official climate emergency declaration as outlined at Section 9, Information IN2 on the September 9th board meeting agenda. Upon research of the One Cowichan Education Society and other groups in the valley, it appears some are operating under a network external to our valley, the Global Transition Network, with the local transition Cowichan, the Cowichan Valley Transition Group, being the local chapter. This needs to be scrutinized and made transparent to the public. Upon reading the literature on this umbrella group, it would seem that when a government body declares an official climate emergency, this declaration has connotations of other responsibilities attached to it that taxpayers need to be aware of, as they are the ones paying the bills. Trying to slide this declaration through as a lobby group pushing the CVRD is very concerning, if not abhorrent. One Cowichan does not represent the official consensus of the taxpayers of our valley. We were not officially consulted on this, and we had no previous knowledge of these inner workings and networks going on in the valley. Here is an excerpt of my letter of concern to the editor of the Cowichan Valley Citizen newspaper that I'd like you to take into consideration before making your decision. According to the literature, the Transition Network organization seeks to and almost always succeeds in paralleling community and governmental services and infiltrates governmental positions. It is especially disturbing if this is done while advocating for and receiving public funding, as many charities do. It looks like the Transition Network is dominating municipal governments one by one on a global scale in the guise of, among other things, reclaiming the economy from capitalism. Unfortunately, the alleged political agenda is not made transparent to the very public that is being overtaken. One of the guides it uses is the Transition Initiatives Primer that outlines, among other things, how to insinuate itself into groups and coerce communities into adopting its plan of collectivism through educational initiatives, films, etc. Thank you for your consideration to my concerns. Please take the above into advisement before making your decision on this matter. And the final submission. Mr. Chair, Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. On this evening's agenda is CR1, Report and Recommendations of the Regional Services Committee meeting of July 22nd, 2020, Regional Surface Water Quality Monitoring Strategy. I hope this strategy will set up action programs where known causes of the deterioration of the quality of our drinking water are rectified immediately. So many of these problems can be solved just by stopping improper soil deposits or the logging of stream easements. We hope that this strategy will not all end up in another glossy manual that sits on a shelf. We truly hope that rectification of known and obvious watershed problems will be rectified. Thank you very much. And that concludes public input period.
Thank you very much, Ms. Legault, and for everyone's patience to get through all of those. And we will move on, I believe, to our delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item D1 is our delegation. Kelly Malnichenko, Water Authorization Section Head, Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development regarding water challenges and progress in the Coaxial Watershed.
Thank you very much and welcome, Kelly.
Thank you very much for having me. I am going to attempt to share my screen here. I think everybody had a copy of the presentation, but I changed it a little bit. Okay. Then I'm not going to be able to see your faces because I'm going to look at my speaking notes. Okay, here we go. Everybody can see my screen, my presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're not looking at my speaking notes, right? You're seeing the full screen?
Yes, we're seeing the full screen. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I'll move through this fairly quickly since I understand I only have 10 minutes. It's a pretty big and complex issue, so I've tried to focus this in as much as possible, but I appreciate the opportunity to listen to what I have to say and share my presentation with you. So as I was introduced, I'm the Water Authorization Section Head with the West Coast region for the Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. And so I lead the team of water authorization staff for the region. And our main role is to implement the Water Sustainability Act within the West Coast region. This primarily involves the adjudication of water license applications and short-term use approvals, managing some compliance and enforcement issues, and then managing the resource as a whole. But more and more, we're being pulled to managing the resources, and particularly during periods of low flow and drought events. So I'm going to give this brief presentation on the water scarcity challenges that we're observing and involved in the Coaxial Watershed, and some of the short-term and long-term actions that have been taken and are underway.
Mr. Chair, could I raise a point of order just before Kelly gets underway?
Yeah.
I'd move that the 10-minute limit be extended to as long as she needs to provide this presentation. I think it's important information that we all need to hear, and I'd really hate for it to be abbreviated due to the 10-minute time limit that we have for delegations. And I would move that if there was a seconder.
Seconded by alternate Director Haim and several others. And I'll call the question, and please hold your hands up just so that it's I can see them. All those in favor? Okay, I think everyone's in favor. Yes. Okay, that motion passes. Thank you, Director Morrison. Please continue.
Thank you. I'll maybe I can slow down my speaking a little bit. So, so this presentation, I will give just a brief overview of the watershed. I assume most of you are pretty familiar with the area. And then I'll talk a bit more about the science behind the water scarcity and demand, and then look a little bit at the hydraulic connectivity between the groundwater and surface water. And then look at the short-term actions that have been taken since 2017 up until the present, and then a bit more about the long-term planning initiatives and some of the conclusions that I've drawn from the work that I've been involved in. So this is the Coaxial Watershed. As you all know, it's a 312 kilometer squared watershed, so relatively small. It's rain dominated, so there's not a lot of snowpack that contributes to the flows in the watershed. So I'm sure many of you seen it. The flows peak up and then they drop down, and they peak up and they drop down with every rainfall event. And unlike the Cowichan River, it doesn't have a storage structure. So there's no lake or dam that's maintaining a constant flow in the river to provide water for water users or the aquatic ecosystem. It has always historically experienced low summer flows and higher temperatures, but as you'll see in my next few slides, those summer flows have been declining over time. It's also historically important to populations of coho salmon, steelhead, and rainbow trout. And these populations have been in decline since at least the 1980s. And they've also been traditionally used by local First Nations in the area. High water demands from surface and groundwater users, especially in the lower watershed, are putting additional pressures on the water that remains in the river. So this is just can you see my mouse when I put it over here? Yeah, okay. So
Yes.
Here's the outline of the watershed, and all this gray area makes up about 80% of the watershed. It's labeled as vacant, but most of it is forestry land. And then the remaining 20% is made up primarily of residential, 33% agricultural, and some institutional, recreational, and a little bit of commercial and industrial. So the majority of the population and land use aside from forestry is down in this lower end of the watershed. And all these little dots are registered wells within the watershed. And then looking at those different land use sectors, we've broken out different water uses and their volumes by day. So this is summertime daily volumes. So you can see that agriculture, including irrigation and stock watering, make up a large proportion of the water use during the summer, and then followed by industrial and some waterworks. So that would be supply to households through a water supply system, and then much less by domestic, commercial, recreational, and institutional. And on this graph, the blue is showing groundwater and the orange is surface water use. Overall, we estimate that groundwater accounts for about half of the water use in the watershed. But very little of this groundwater use is actually licensed so far. So we have some applications, but a lot of it is based on inferred use, understanding what the land is being used for, and just estimating the volume of water that's likely used on that land. So as you can see, despite only accounting for 33% of the land use, the agriculture sector uses about 70% of the water during the summer months. So this is just another way of looking at the water use and the spatial distribution of the water use within the watershed. The surface water use is represented by the orange dots, and groundwater use is represented by the purple dots. And the size of the dots is relative to the volume of water being used in each of those locations. So you can see that the largest uses, like the population, are concentrated in the lower watershed. And there's over 1,100 surface and groundwater users within the watershed. So this chart shows several things, but looking at it all together can be quite interesting. The shaded blue area here is average August discharge in the watershed over time, starting in 1955 to 2018. So you can see there's definitely a bit of a decline over time. And we use August flows because they're generally the lowest, and we want to compare August flows over time. This blue line is licensed surface water demand over time. So you can see it gradually increased until 1980, and then there was a restriction put on the stream. So it's not a legal restriction, but it's a recommendation to decision makers that no licenses be granted on the Coaxial or its tributaries for any purpose other than domestic, unless that use is supported by storage for summertime use. So surface water use basically plateaued in 1980. And then this green line is cumulative estimated groundwater demand over time. So basically represents development of wells within the watershed over time. So that continued to increase after this 1980 date when surface water, when that surface water restriction was put in place. And then this red line shows the cumulative surface water and groundwater use combined. So you can see that that's increased significantly since way back in 1955 and continues to increase up to today. And that restriction that was put on the stream in 1980 was put there due to the recognition that the stream could no longer support any additional use, and that additional use would impact the environmental flow needs of the stream at that time in 1980. Before, I think there was much recognition about how much climate change may impact flows in the future as well. So this is just another way of looking at the August discharge over time. It's looking at the average discharge for each decade. So the kind of whiskers on each of these box plots show the minimums and maximums. But again, you can see those averages are declining over time with some variation, of course. But it is interesting to note that this last decade, there's been a lot less variability, and it's been concentrated down in this low end. And it's yet been consistently low for the last 10 years. So this shows more of a close-in over the last 3 years, 2017 through 2019. I haven't included the 2020 data because we haven't even completed the low flow season yet. Note that this is data from the Water Survey of Canada station. Our ministry also maintains a monitoring station downstream, and there are some large irrigation intakes between the Water Survey of Canada station and our monitoring station. So flows actually get lower at our station usually than at this station. So the dashed line here is average discharge for basically the last century. And then we look at 2017 here, the light blue. 2018 was medium blue, and it was very low throughout most of the late summer. And then 2019 is here. At our station, it did drop below this red line, but not at the WSC gauge, and there was regulatory action here, so that's likely why it didn't fall below for an extended period of time. So this red line is put in here at 180 liters a second. That's the flow at which populations of fish are, I think, significantly threatened, and the aquatic habitat and ecosystem is quite compromised. And that's the flow that we've been managing to, saying that we cannot let the river fall below this threshold, or there's going to be long-term detrimental impacts. However, this yellow line is actually what the environmental flow needs of the stream are. So that's up at 490 liters a second. And that's what it's estimated that are the flows that would be needed to kind of maintain a healthy aquatic ecosystem, as including steelhead. So average flows even fall below that basically every year, will always. So despite the fact that we're managing to this level to maintain a healthy aquatic ecosystem in the long term, this is the level that that would be needed, I think, in most years. Just looking at my notes here. All right. So I know this slide is really busy, and I don't expect you to be able to really understand it or read it all. It comes out of a report, and there's a link here for it, done by Western Water. After 2018, when we identified that this is a really significant problem and we really needed to get a better handle on how groundwater was contributing to the flow in the Coaxial, we undertook a contract to have the hydraulic connectivity assessed from a desktop approach. So Western Water did the contract, and they looked at points on the stream that were perched and not perched, basically. So finding locations where wells are likely hydraulically connected to the stream. And they found that every single well in the watershed is hydraulically connected or is likely hydraulically connected to either the main stem of the Coaxial River or one of its tributaries. So it's not always the closest distance, but within, there's always a point along the stream where there could be connection or is likely connection. So all of these little lines are indicating connection, the point of connection from all these black dots which represent wells. And these orange or yellowy images here are the bedrock aquifers in the two parts of the watershed. This is the Kelvin Creek area, and this is the Coaxial and Petrolis. And then this greeny image is the overburden or unconsolidated aquifer that overlays bedrock aquifers. So understanding that every well is hydraulically connected to the stream means that we know that every groundwater user has an impact on stream flow, and every new well contributes to a cumulative impact on flow. So now I'll talk a bit about actions we've taken since 2017 up until now. These are more actions to try and understand the uses and the interactions between the community and the surface water and the groundwater, the communication that we've undertaken, and the regulatory action that we took in 2019. So it was identified after the Water Sustainability Act was implemented in 2016, that gave us the authority to start looking at these low flows and actually take regulatory action if the flows were falling below the critical environmental flow threshold or the flow at which fish populations may be threatened. And our ecosystem biologist highlighted about 10 streams on the island that should be looked at closer by our group, and the Coaxial was one where it was fairly obvious that there's a significant number of users and that use may be directly impacting stream flow, so regulatory action could actually have a positive effect on stream flow if it were taken. So we worked for the last 4 years doing community outreach, holding community meetings, posting e-bulletins. Staff were out in the fields in 2018 and 2019 visiting all of the users or the major water users to understand their use and inform them of the challenges and that regulatory action could be taken. This involved a huge number of staff. We have a group of 16, and in 2018 and 19, most of us were out working on this for at least a month. We've also installed flow monitoring stations on the Coaxial in 2 locations, partly to inform regulatory action and decision making, and also just to gain additional data to help our understanding of the stream. This year we have a station at the Lower Trestle Bridge, and another one up near Kingburn Park. So that kind of brackets the majority of the users on the system, and then the WSC gauge as well is right in the middle of there. So we're learning as we go, but we have very reliable data, or we have for the last few years. We have staff in the stream twice a week during the low flow season to make sure that our model is calibrated and that we have the best data possible for making decisions. And we've also done field inspections looking for active pumping, so we know where the water use is taking place, and identifying unauthorized diversions. We have issued some orders to cease diversion for unauthorized users. And for the last 3 years, we have sent letters out to all users in the watershed requesting voluntary reductions to try to increase flows in the river enough to prevent regulatory action. In 2018, we attempted regulatory action, but I don't think we quite understood enough about getting an order up to the minister to be successful, and the amount of information and procedural fairness required was pretty significant. But in 2019, we were successful, recommended an order to the minister, and a temporary protection order was implemented under Section 88 of the Water Sustainability Act to curtail the use of water for irrigation of forage crops and industrial purpose to about 40 water users. And since the temporary protection order in 2019, there's been more motivation to collaborate, and we've had active engagement from representatives from the community, as well as the Coaxial Watershed Board, BC Dairy, Ministry of Agriculture, ArdCorp, and several others. We've been working together. I think we've managed to achieve much more effective communication and managed to develop and implement an irrigation schedule, which is voluntary. 18 irrigators committed to participating in this irrigation schedule to reduce their use by 50% if flows fell to 200 liters a second. And I'll show you in the next slide the results of the action in 2019 and this year. Excuse me. So this is the kind of response in 2019. The regulatory action was in, or the order from the regulatory action was in place for about a month, August 19th. This is September 18th. And the estimated economic impact to agriculture was almost $500,000, and to industry was about $113,000. So a pretty significant impact. However, we did have the data analyzed by Northwest Hydraulics, and the analysis found that the regulatory action did have a positive, was the cause of the positive stream flow response. So this is just one chart out of a out of that report. I don't believe it's publicly available yet, but it will be. We've made the request to have it added, so I can provide the link, excuse me, when it becomes available. So just one example here to show the positive response. This red line is flows in the Chemainus River. It's a larger watershed, but it's close in proximity, so you can compare the flows. Generally, they follow very similar trends. You can see the Chemainus here and the Coaxial here following very similar trends. The order was issued right in here, and then you can see that the Coaxial flows increase, the Chemainus stayed the same or decreased, and the Coaxial actually went above the flows in the Chemainus a couple times, which is very rare. And then this is where the precipitation event happened and the order was rescinded. So conclusions from that was that water use does directly impact flows in the Coaxial, and that regulatory action can cause a positive stream flow response if and when needed. So this year, like I said, there were 18 agriculture producers. So those are most of the large irrigators in the watershed voluntarily participated in an irrigation schedule that was developed by a consultant working for ArdCorp, which is a subsidiary of the Ministry of Agriculture. And that irrigation schedule was meant to reduce water use by those users by 50%. It was a 4-day on, 4-day off schedule. We did have a fairly wet early summer, but flows were approaching the 200 liters a second in mid-August. So these numbers are a bit higher than they actually were, and then we adjusted the curve here, but the flows were trending down here. They were nearing 200, and the irrigation schedule was implemented here. So you can see the upswing in the flows caused by the ceasing of diversion by 50% of those irrigators. It went along for 4 days. It gradually declined, and then it switched over to the other 4 irrigators. And then somewhat fortunately and somewhat unfortunately, because we didn't get as much data as I would have liked to get, we had that very large precipitation event and the flows went up. The benefit of having this as a voluntary action rather than a regulatory action was that immediately they were able to suspend the irrigation schedule and initiate irrigation again if they needed needed water in their fields at that time, and they were willing to implement it again if flows fell back down to that 200 liters a second threshold. So again, you can see that there is stream flow recovery when water use is reduced. So moving on to the long-term planning, it's recognized by the province in Flynn Road that annual curtailment of water rights is not a long-term solution to low flows in the watershed, and there could be significant economic impacts over time. And it also is a significant investment of resources on an annual basis. So our ministry has partnered with Coaxial Tribes. There was an interim letter of agreement signed by Minister Doug Donaldson and Chief Seymour in February of 2020. And this agreement has committed the province and Coaxial Tribes to working together to undertaking a scoping process to find a long-term solution for water sustainability in the Coaxial Watershed. So this process will engage regional partners and community members and use collaboration, creativity, and effective science-based planning to help address drought and changing hydrology for the benefit of of all Coaxial residents. The process is meant to be transparent with an initial focus on addressing environmental, economic, and social risks around drought and low flows, building relationships, capacity, and knowledge, and laying the foundation for a whole of watershed approach to water management for the benefit of all members of the wider community. So there's currently 3 projects underway. One is a project being undertaken by Coaxial Tribes members. It's a community outreach to impart, collect traditional ecological knowledge from elders, but also understand just from the community what their values and uses are of the watershed. There's also a community outreach and engagement contract underway for the rest of the Coaxial community and residents, and that includes 16 interviews of representatives of different interest holders such as forestry, agriculture, community members, recreation, local government, and others. And the results of these interviews will inform a survey that will be distributed more broadly to at least 100 participants, ideally more. And that will help inform or understand what the values are of the people in the watershed, and I think what they see as not necessarily what the solution is, but what the results of a positive solution would be. And then there's also technical work underway to identify what the causes of the low flows are and the relative magnitude of those causes of low flows. So once those are complete, those 3 projects will be collated and will feed into recommendations for the most appropriate tool to address the challenges in the watershed and what those next steps should be. There are tools, legislative tools within the Water Sustainability Act, including a water sustainability plan and or other area-based regulations, but we'll wait and see what the recommendations are from those 3 projects. There's also other work being done to increase our understanding and inform the long-term and short-term actions, including expanding the groundwater monitoring network and continuing to work on refining our groundwater, surface water interaction understanding. Excuse me. So while this is all going on, we're still receiving new use groundwater applications. There isn't a mechanism without putting an area-based regulation in place to stop receiving these applications. They must be considered. They don't have to be approved, but they must be considered. So, but under the Water Sustainability Act, the decision maker must consider environmental flow needs, as well as impacts to other users and impacts to Indigenous interests in their decision. So knowing that all wells are hydraulically connected to surface water in the watershed, there can't be new licenses granted that impact low flows, so that cause water to not reach or be taken from the stream during the summer months. So ultimately, this is resulting or will result in very high costs to applicants to be able to develop storage if they choose to move forward with their plans, and significant costs in undertaking technical investigations by qualified professionals like hydrogeologists to understand the timing of storage and the volume of storage that may be required to prevent the impacts to the stream flows. This creates a lot of uncertainty for these prospective businesses. And there's also a pretty significant investment of time from our staff and an extended time for review and adjudication of the application because of the uncertainty and the need to get it right, because we can't cause additional impacts. So that brings me to my conclusions. I'll just summarize what I talked about, but as you saw in some of those slides, the flows fall below the environmental flow needs of the aquatic ecosystem annually in the Coaxial Watershed. There are likely many factors contributing. It's probably not just water use. It involves land use, climate change, and probably many other factors. But based on the work that we've done, we know that water use directly impacts stream flows. We know that groundwater wells are likely hydraulically connected to the Coaxial River and its tributaries, and that all new water use will deplete to some extent the water in the watershed. And that adds a burden to those existing users. The large users are those that are like the ones that will be likely the most impacted by regulatory action and other actions moving forward. So new use by small users puts an additional burden on those existing larger users, as well as the stream. Overall, the current situation isn't sustainable. There's significant efforts and resources being put towards understanding and addressing the situation, but there's not a simple answer, and it's probably going to take many years before there is a long-term water sustainability plan, whatever that tool may be, in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that informative, fascinating, and somewhat terrifying presentation. I do appreciate all of the work and am thankful for the work with Cowichan Tribes and, of course, the Coaxial Watershed Board and all of the users in the watershed. Now that I've got the screen back up, I can assume there's probably a large number of questions. I'll do my best to keep a speakers list. I've got Director Yanni DiNardo, Director Salmon, Director Morrison, Alternate Director Justice, and I'll start there. And if I see more hands as we go, I will turn to you. So first to Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Callie. I really appreciate this presentation. The area that I am in for Area D, Cowichan Bay, is of course the end of the Coaxial in the estuary. It's been very important to me in all my years that I've been working with the CVRD and even volunteering, because I've always been saying that poor Coaxial, we got a lot of attention from Cowichan, which needed it, but the Coaxial, you could see that it was really being stressed. And one of them that I'd been working on but didn't get very far was a farmer. It was then called Broadway Farm on Cowichan Bay Road, which the farmer actually cut off the river. So he just took his machinery, filled in the river. And I couldn't get anywhere with that. And I just wondered if that's like part of the ecosystem, is these tributaries, these little channels that actually are very valuable to the river. And is that another thing that you were looking at with all of your staff? And I have one more question.
Yeah, so the work that we've been doing over the last 4 years is primarily to understand the water use. We're also interested in looking at how those very small tributaries are contributing to flow and supporting the ecosystems in those small tributaries. I'm not aware of the situation you're talking about. It does sound like it may have been illegal. It would have, at least to do it legally, would have required a permit. But I think over time, if we move into a water sustainability plan, it's a whole of watershed approach. It's not just looking at water use. It's going to look at watershed sustainability. We don't know exactly what the scope of that will be yet, or even if the water sustainability plan is what the tool that will be used. But yeah, I think ideally we'll be looking at the health of the watershed overall.
Yeah, that's great. And the other question, if I may, Mr. Chair, the other question is the farmers. So I'm also in the Cherry Point area, and I get a lot of complaints. Of course, it is not our jurisdiction, of farmers that water 24/7, like day and night. And then we on the other side of the street are all on restriction and the same water system, basically. So my curiosity is the 4 days on, 4 days off for farmers. How was their productivity, or was that ever looked at? Because it seems to me that 24/7 watering, to me, when I see it running down into the ocean, is a waste. But I'm not a farmer. So I'm wondering if there was any studies on that when they did do those kind of shifts, the 4 days on, 4 days off, or however they did it, if their production was the same or very much lower.
So that just happened a few weeks ago, so we haven't had a chance to analyze any of it. I mean, fortunately for the producers, it rained shortly after. Unfortunately, like I said, for our data, we probably don't have enough to really understand what those impacts to the producers were, or what the long-term benefit to the stream may have been. But I think we can probably draw some conclusions. Hopefully, we'll be able to get that data analyzed over the winter. Yeah, I'm not an irrigation expert. I have done quite a bit of work with Ministry of Agriculture and industry representatives. There is quite a bit of information available on irrigation and why they irrigate 24/7. I might be able to point you to that another time. Or
it would be great if if I could share with some of your staff the area that was the river is completely blocked off. I have shared it with DFO. Cowichan Tribes is aware of it as well, and that would be great to connect up on that. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Director Salmon, then Morrison, then Justice, then Marsh.
Yes, thank you, Kelly, for the excellent presentation. I'm from Mill Bay, Malahat, where we also have serious water issues, but my question is about the domestic users. You mentioned not covered by the regime, and to me, that seems like a very large loophole, and I'm wondering if there's any future considerations you know about to include domestic in the licensing.
Yeah, so with the surface water, that restriction I was talking about, the restrictions aren't legally binding, and it's just basically a recommendation. We could, I think there may have been 2 domestic licenses granted since 1980. At this point in time, I don't think we would consider any new use at all under a license for surface water. However, because licensing was basically shut down since 1980, people moved to drilling wells. And as you're probably aware, the Water Sustainability Act requires licenses for all water use purposes other than domestic groundwater. So that is a loophole at this point. There is options for area-based regulation that could require licensing of all water use purposes, including domestic. So that's one type of area-based regulation. The Water Sustainability Plan, if that goes ahead, would probably bring in a lot of different area-based regulations, and I would assume that would be one of them. Unfortunately, these area-based regulations can't be implemented overnight, and there's a significant amount of work that has to go into them. But yeah, there are tools under the legislation that are meant for water scarce areas like this and Mill Bay and the Gulf Islands, areas like that hopefully will be implemented over time to help with management of the scarce resource.
Yeah, follow up. So just say it again, that what part of the act needs to be implemented?
There are different options for area-based regulations. I don't have the act open in front of me. If you look near the end of the act, there's a lot of different regulations that can be created. If you look at Division 4 water sustainability plans, it lays out a lot of the different regulations that can be implemented.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Kelly. Fascinating report. Took a fair bit of reading over the weekend, and it just shows and it paints a pretty bleak picture for what you're dealing with, and I could see how this could be a sort of a career project for someone over the long term. But my question is more to and I want to preface this by saying I know how important agriculture is to this area and to the regional district as a whole, and how the dramatic impact of cutting back on the water usage last year had on so many farmers. But we've done economic development studies on some of what's being produced on the land here, and we know that it's a fairly high percentage, a really high percentage is forage crops. And I would imagine that would be true here. So do you have a fairly good idea as to what most of the irrigation, especially the surface water, but it seems like it's about equal for groundwater as well, what that water is going to? And the next point is, and obviously that irrigation is a big target because it's more than everything else combined. It's 70%, as you noted. And do you see the possibility of dugout storage on either a communal one or on each individual farm as being one of the ultimate solutions for collecting the overwinter rainwater and being able to apply it during the drought times?
I think there's a few questions in there. Yes, we do have a pretty good idea of what's being irrigated on the different properties. Ministry of Agriculture does hold that information. Unfortunately, they're not really allowed to share it with us. But we have pretty good aerial photography, and it's not a large area. We've driven around quite a bit, and we've spoken to most of the people that are the large users. So it is mostly forage crops, and they're fairly water-intensive crops. I have no authority or jurisdiction over land use of what people are growing. I think if there's going to be a shift in crop types, that's going to have to be a collaboration probably between Ministry of Agriculture and local government and a lot of different agencies and jurisdictions. There's probably potential to produce lower, less water intensive crops, but I'm certainly not the expert in that. I do think that I don't know what the capacity is in terms of the land size and the cost necessarily, but I do think that to have the amount of water use that's taking place right now in the summer months, storage is likely, it's the most obvious solution to me. I think through the water sustainability planning, if we go that way, there'll be a lot of effort put into what are the potential solutions. And I think storage would be one of those things, something that would be assessed. Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be just rainwater that's captured. Diversion can take place over the winter. On an annual basis, there's plenty of water. It's just these few months, July through September, that it's very water scarce.
Thank you, Director Morrison. I have Director Justice, then Marsh, then Nicholson. Director Justice.
Thank you very much. Through you to Ms. Melnichenko. Fantastically interesting presentation. In describing what is known about the hydraulic connectivity, you said a couple of times, and I hope I've got this right, that all wells are probably hydraulically connected to surface water or streams. I can only imagine the complexity of making such determinations, but I wonder if you can describe in sort of basic terms how this work has been done and the sorts of things about hydraulic connectivity that still need to be understood.
I'll do my best. I'm not a hydrogeologist, but I work with a lot of them. Excuse me. So like the best way to understand the aquifers is to look at the existing wells and the lithology of those wells. So the well records that we have on file that shows the stratigraphy and what those aquifers are composed of. it's really expensive to drill wells. So ideally, we're using existing information as much as possible. Installing a new monitoring well is tens of thousands of dollars. So obviously, we can't be putting in hundreds of those to help with our understanding. We've installed some, and there will be more going in. But using those well records, we can model what those aquifers are composed of. So we know there's various bedrock units and unconsolidated, so sand and gravel units, as well as some confining layers. So confining layers are like tail or clay, very dense, fine materials that don't really let water percolate through, or it doesn't move through very quickly. If a stream is within that confining layer, there's probably not much connection between a well that's on the other side of that confining layer and the stream. So what that desktop analysis did, that I showed those images from Western Water, was, so it was purely desktop, but they looked at all of the well records within the watershed that had lithology in the record, and found areas where the stream was exposed, so not within a confining layer, and maybe not within bedrock as well, I'm not sure, but basically found gaps in the stream where it was not perched above the water table, and it was not set within the confining layer. So then they drew lines basically from every well to identify where that use may be impacting stream flow, at what point on the stream. And then we also understand the different characteristics of the aquifer. So they all have different storativity and transmissivity values that can be attributed to them. And that helps us understand the stream flow depletion, the rate of depletion, and the lag time from when that use occurs to when it's impacting the stream. Does that help?
Yes, thank you for that. If I might just ask a quick follow-up. One of the things that got me thinking about that was when you showed the uses by sector bar charts. And I was curious about whether it was just pure coincidence that the groundwater and surface water use by agriculture is almost identical at about 13,000 meters cubed per day, I think it is, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I think it is mostly coincidence. There's definitely a lot of agricultural producers that have a surface water license, and they also have wells on their property. So there is probably some duplication there. I didn't generate that data, so I'm not entirely sure, but I think there's a lot of people started with surface water licenses, and then they may have been on tributaries that were going dry, so they went and drilled wells, or they needed more water, they couldn't get a license, so they went and drilled wells. And so some are using a combination of surface water and groundwater, and some are using one or the other.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Director Marsh, and then Director Nicholson to close unless I have more hands go up. Director Marsh.
You know, the hardest thing in the world is to follow Director or Counselor Justice talking about scientific questions. But I guess what I would like to know, Callie, and thank you very much for your presentation. I can't pronounce your last name, so I'm taking the ungiven privilege of calling you your first name. Do you think there's any way we can get this river back to health?
That's a good question. I think it's possible, but I don't know what the costs would be of doing that. I think that my assumption is that naturally stream flows will fall near or below that environmental flow needs. And that is just a modeled number, and it does come, it was a recommendation back in the 1980s. It has been reviewed. It's still believed that that is the environmental flow needs of the stream, but almost every stream on the east coast of Vancouver Island, whether there is use or not, falls below that. That's 5% of the mean annual discharge, and most of them naturally fall below that. So I don't think that it necessarily has to be above that threshold to be a healthy aquatic ecosystem, but we do need to get a better understanding of what we need to achieve to reach that sustainable aquatic environment. And I think there's other factors in addition to water use that needs to be addressed, such as water quality. And yeah.
Can you share some of those other factors?
Well, I think those are, right now, I only have authority over water quantity, and I'm quite focused on that. But through the water sustainability planning, it will be incorporating. We can include things like water objectives. So those are like water quality objectives. I think we'll be looking at all things like that. And there are other people that are much more informed about what some of the other concerns are with the watershed. I know there's concerns about the estuary and deposition and water quality and everything. To have a healthy environment, we would need to address all of those factors.
Yeah. So really, all I can say is how sad I feel, because even if there was a way, I think the last few decades, and including quite a bit of the correspondence this evening, shows that there certainly isn't an overwhelming will to do what needs to be done to have a healthy ecosystem and to have a planet that can, if not reverse climate change, at least not continue it to become absolutely catastrophic here as it has in other places. And I know, Mr. Chair, that's not a question and I should get off my soapbox, so I'm going to stop talking. Thank you for tolerating me, and those of you who don't, thank you for not telling me.
I think you were fine. You just, yeah, I think it was fine. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kelly, for the presentation. It is really sobering to see. I mean, the river has been in trouble. The community has been concerned about the river for a long time, and certainly with the last decade of hotter, drier, longer summers, we're really seeing it now. So, and it's not going to go away. And it is sobering from the perspective of the community and agriculture, because food security on the island is incredibly important. And yes, it's a lot of forage production, but the forage is to largely feed the dairy herds. And we have 10 large dairies in the Coaxial Watershed. So I think lots of us drink milk and eat yogurt. And I think, we really need to pay attention to the Coaxial, because it's really as they say, the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the eastern side of Vancouver Island. But I am optimistic. There are lots of opportunities for storage and so forth. But I think what's most interesting to me in this job that we have at the CBRD is looking at it from a land use perspective. So while domestic water use isn't, relatively speaking to the agriculture use, a big user of waters, it definitely, every little bit counts now. And so whatever we can do to be proactive in our land use to reduce the development that is going to increase water use, I think is super important for us to start thinking about right now, because as Callie mentioned, it's going to take a number of years before any provincial regulations can be put in place to really start to turn things around. So the other thing I'd really like to do is I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Callie Melnichenko and her staff. I have been absolutely impressed with how collaborative and open and accessible they have been for the community. It's really helped the community come together, and I think people really understand that it is a problem that we all have. It's a water community, and we all have to to work together to fix it. And Kelly and her staff have done an amazing job at learning and working and being open to the community, because the community is a huge resource. And I'm pretty excited with the initiative, with the scoping initiative with Coaxial Tribes, because it really is reconciliation, as Melissa likes to tell us, and yeah, it's pretty exciting. So I am optimistic, and I really thank you, Kelly, and for all the work that you do.
Thanks, Allison.
On that, I think that's a good note to leave it on. I want to thank Kelly Melnichenko, I think I got it right, for all the work. And I will admit some skepticism when the Water Sustainability Act came forward. Just it's nice to see that being put into action as well. And as Director Nicholson said, the reconciliation is also very encouraging. So thank you very much for your presentation, and more so for all your work. And thank you. We'll do our little Zoom clap.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll see you again with a good update and hopefully some good news in the future.
I hope so too.
So now,
step off the call now.
Thank you. You can stay, but
That's
if
okay.
you that's fine.
I've got family that would probably like to have me back.
Stay with me, as do we, for sure. Thank you. Have a great day. What's the pleasure of the board? Would you like to take just a 10-minute break? I think we're coming up on that time anyway, so why don't we just take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back here, or let's say 8 minutes at 7:55.
Camera's buffering. I'll let you know when it's live.
Thank you.
Camera's live.
I need to get a swivel chair so I can turn around and say, and we're back. All right. Sorry, I was entertaining myself. Ms. Legault, where are we in our agenda this evening?
Item 7, is there a report of the chairperson?
Not this evening, no.
Then there is no correspondence. On to information items. IN1 is a petition from Arbutus Ridge Ratepayers Association regarding dashboard implementation, and this is for information.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this information item? I had a feeling. I'll go to Director Wilson and then Director McGonigal. Did I miss anyone else? Okay, Director Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, you know my feelings are on this. You and I have spoken before about implementing some kind of system which logs and basically shows what happens with the voting without people having to go through all the minutes of meetings and things like that. Now, as you will recall, we did speak of GovPlace, whatever it's called, GovBC, which has these built into it, the ones that we use at the moment. But I've seen no progress on that. So I would really like to see something either come forward on PrimeGov, or let's start thinking about implementing a system which is being used, by the way, by other jurisdictions and has been found to be very useful in finding out what the various councillors and directors are doing. So I'm in full agreement with this input.
Thank you very much. And, you know, I believe that technically with the vote section within PrimeGov, it is definitely technically possible. I'm just not sure where their timeline would be for implementing it. I did some research into other systems that are like PrimeGov that do deploy a sort of dashboard, and they are sort of separate systems. So I'm not sure if PrimeGov would mate with one of those other systems easily. But it's definitely something that, you know, I would be supportive of at least having a conversation about as we move into the future.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm sure you agree that the voting record of directors and elected officials is a very important aspect of the work that we do. And residents shouldn't be forced to be searching into all sorts of documentation to find out what the voting record is. And that's basically what it's all about: transparency and being able to look very quickly and see who did what and who said what. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I've got Director McGonigal and then Director Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also support this as a democratic and process for the public to see what does transpire at the table. One thing I'd like clarification on is if I have the same information as every other director, I have one signature on this petition. Was there more? I'm just wondering if it's perhaps in the sending, it was only the one signature. There's considerably more in most petitions that I have been handed.
Thank you. I would put that through to staff.
And I can speak to that as well if you like as well, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'll go to staff first because they should have received the petition, and then once we get clarity, I can ask you for more information. Because the item attached only has one signature on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I haven't seen anything further, but there may have been something come through another office that I wasn't aware of.
Okay, thank you. I'll give you another shot at it before I go to Director Marsh, Director Wilson.
Yeah, very quickly. This is something which a lot of my residents have been speaking to me about, and I think in this particular instance, that perhaps the word petition was not quite correct. I think the resident was basically just trying to bring forward his views and the views of some of his neighbours. So, petition was probably not the right grammatical word to use.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Marsh.
Yeah, I can understand the desire to have the voting records, who voted for what, recorded. However, I can't count how many times I've gone into a meeting thinking I was going to vote one way, and after listening to the debate, realizing, oh my gosh, I think I'm wrong. So I'm not sure really how valuable the voting records are, except for people who are more inclined to follow individuals or parties. And so if it takes a lot of money or time, I don't think it's worth it. I think there's a lot more important things to do. But having said that, I agree with the director that, you know, there's a lot of people that would like to know that. I think I'd rather educate people in that there's so much more to this job than you think. And yeah, anyway, that's just my thought on it.
Thank you. And again, this information item, I'm not sure I want to turn it into a back and forth debate. I'm looking at like City of Vancouver and some of the others that do deploy a dashboard. It's just a record of votes, and it does, you know, provide at least some curiosity over trends over time. And it's always the outcome of decision making. It's not you know, our thoughts going into a decision. But I'll give you one more, Director Wilson, and then hopefully we can move on because we do have a long agenda ahead still.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I think you covered most of what it. I think Director Marsh is under the misconception that this is some kind of mind reading situation. It's not. It's how you vote, not how you think you might vote.
I appreciate that. Okay, Director Marsh, I'll give you one more, and then if we can just not go in a back and forth debate, that'd be fantastic. Director Marsh, you're just muted.
Yeah, I would prefer that people didn't make assumptions about what I was thinking. When I hear the chair talk about Vancouver, Vancouver is a municipality that has parties. So I can see the value in that. And all I'm saying is, me personally, you don't have to agree with me. I'd like to move away from that, not towards that.
Thank you. And anyone else want to speak on this topic? Seeing none, we'll move on. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item IN2 is correspondence from One Cowichan regarding a request to local government follow through on climate action. This is for information.
Thank you. Another information item. Any discussion on this one? Go to Director Wilson and then Director Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, from the public input, there is a great deal of interest in this particular one. One of the things that came up in those letters and other things that have been appearing in the newspapers is something that concerns me greatly, which is the Delphi technique, where basically you put up these little yellow stickers and then people write down. I've seen that abused more than once. It happened during the MOCP and HOCP. It happened during the watershed and referendum, where basically the bases were loaded by special interest groups who were posted up more than one sticker per person, and it skewed any results that could be done. It's a technique which has been around for a while, and it's not an accurate reflection of what's going on. It's one of the techniques that One Cowichan uses all the time. Again, I'm concerned as to what's in this letter, because verification of those who are listed on the One Cowichan letter, for example, there is a resident there who says that she is from Shawnigan Lake School. Does she represent what the views of Shawnigan Lake School, or what's going on there? That's misleading, to say the least. And I'm very concerned also about the backdoor techniques that One Cowichan uses. If they feel strongly about this kind of thing, perhaps they should stand candidates for election to public office. Stand up and be counted rather than try and influence people, which we know goes on behind the scenes here. Now, that might sound a bit strong, but I do feel strongly about this. It's one of those organizations which really I have very, very little faith in. Very little at all.
Thank you for your perspective. Next, I have Director Marsh and Director Kuhn.
Yeah, I don't really care what the organization might be called. I care about the science, and the science says the climate's changing. And you don't even have to be a scientist to know that the climate's changing. So we said that we were going to, sometime in the fall, I think, talk at our strategic planning session and come up with a statement, and we haven't done it yet. And there's an awful lot of young people that are really discouraged about their future under that, quote, capitalist system. And I do think that, you know, we can be like ostriches, but, you know, I don't want us to do that. I want us to come out boldly and then honestly say what we can do about it. Because I know we can't do everything that I'd like us to be able to do, but I don't want to start debating groups. Let's just, you know, accept the science. I mean, you look at NASA, you look at some of the fiscal, I can't remember the names, but there are just so many well-respected organizations that do not dispute that there's climate change. So why we wouldn't want to agree with them is beyond my comprehension.
Thanks for that perspective. Director Kuhn. Director Kuhn.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you could give me a little bit of latitude, please. I attended, which I was corrected, I thought it was the first meeting of One Cowichan, and I have learned since it was the second meeting of One Cowichan, and I was invited to attend. When this organization was started, I was convinced it was going to be good for our society, for the Cowichan Valley. I was so convinced, I took a $100 bill out of my wallet and I gave it to Matt Price, who organized the whole organization, and said to him, here, let's get started with this. So it might have been a combination of maybe lack of knowledge or naivete on my side, but it looked to me like it was a worthwhile organization. Now, what happened since? I've disconnected from that organization as soon as I found out that it wasn't really, the aim was not really the environment anymore or anything that has to do with bettering the situation in the valley. It was more, the organization was trying to get power. And I've observed that with a whole bunch of NGOs over the years. They start out good, they have good intentions, and they rile up a whole bunch of people because people are convinced it's going to be a good thing for the society. And after a while, they get kind of bored, and then they start realizing, well, man, we could actually get some power with this. And then the whole effort changes. And I think this is what's taken place in One Cowichan, and I very much object to what they're doing because they've infiltrated our board, they've infiltrated the councillors at the different municipalities, and they're doing it in a way that they're using the cover of the environment and climate change and all that in order to organize and get power. And I object to that because they've gone away from the original purpose of it. And now, as far as I'm concerned, they're trying to gain power and do that by avoiding having to be elected. And I've talked to some of the principals, and I've said to them, get your organization, either get it registered as a party and run for election, or else go and run for election yourself. And no, that would be too much work. And it would be too frustrating, because look at us, look at how many different inquiries and complaints do we get during the day or during the week. They don't want to deal with that. No, they go the other way around and try to get power from the non-governmental side. And I'm objective to that, because what that does, it undermines democracy, and I just don't like that. So that's all I'm going to say.
I think I've given sufficient latitude, so thank you for that, Director Kuhn.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I will say there's an adage that was given to me by my first CAO when I got elected, and they said, no matter the organization or the person or how you may feel about the organization or the person, try and look at the substance of their arguments and judge them accordingly. So I can appreciate different perspectives around the organization of One Cowichan, and I feel frustration at times too, especially as I felt that it became sort of a headwind rather than a wind at our back, especially as I think we need help lobbying senior governments for the tools and the financial resources to be able to do more in terms of adapting and mitigating climate change. But I think it's important that we try and sort of step back from the organization and look at the substance of the conversation and take what we can from it. I'm going to go to my speakers list. I have, who hasn't spoken yet, Director Staples, Director McGonigal, and then I'll go back to Director Wilson and Director Kuhn.
I'm not even sure why we're having a discussion on an information item. So I am definitely challenged by that, and that we're not even having a discussion. There's no debate happening here. There's just a lot of opinions being shared. And if anyone wants to take an opinion on any organization, I think that we at least owe them, invite them in and ask them to give a presentation and ask them questions, so that we're doing this in a way that is actually open and transparent with them in the room. You know, some of the things that I'm hearing about this organization, they should have the opportunity to speak to. And so I feel like this is not a good way to speak about any organization. And again, I don't understand why we're even having a discussion on an information item on people's opinions and ideas of an organization and what they're doing. I don't care what organization it is. I just don't know how this is appropriate.
Thank you. Dr. McGonigal.
Thank you, and I echo those remarks. I embrace and encourage information and to take that forward to this board to discuss. I think it's important to have as much information as we can. But the decision in the end is by this body. Lobby groups, whatever entity they come in, will be lobby groups. And regardless of what they are, they lobby for what their interests are. I will embrace the information, the scientific information, and debate it amongst my peers at this table. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Wilson, and then hopefully we can move on.
Yeah, sorry about that. I lost my button there for a minute. First of all, I'm not a climate denier. at the risk of some people wringing their hands and saying, oh, here goes the ancient mariner again. I was 18 years old when I first went to sea, and I've spent 55 years wandering around the world. I've been to as far north as Dutch Harbor in the North Pacific, Reykjavik in the North Atlantic, and all the way down to Tierra del Fuego at the bottom of South America. I've seen what's happening around this world over the last 55 years. So I'm not a climate denier. I've seen it happening over the years. I've been through the Northwest Passage, which we could never do without icebreakers. But in this particular case, I'm going to just say I appreciate Director Staples what she said there. But the point is, One Cowichan has presented this to us and asked us to do something on their behalf. It would, and we can have a discussion on it, but I'm just going to read out and then I'll finish up there what Mr. Foster said. Generally, once an emergency is officially declared, it must be acted upon. And he also says this would initiate a cascade of requirements tied to the UN Initiative on Climate and Development that would add to the already exorbitant tax burden of local citizens. Yes, we need to do something about it, but I'm not going to do anything about it to bow to pressure groups like this who have other agendas.
All right, and I appreciate everyone's opinions and perspectives, but I think on that note, in agreement with Director Staples and my comments as well, as look at the substance of the conversation, not necessarily the group. And it sounds like that's what we are all supportive of. And just as a comment, I know that we had some substantive discussion at our last strategic planning session, and hopefully we can carry that over to a strategic plan that gets adopted that'll help us provide a path forward. Ms. Legault, if we can move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to committee and commission reports. Item CR1, report and recommendations of the Regional Services Committee of July 22nd, and that's Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you. Report and recommendation of Regional Services of July 22nd is 1, that the Regional Surface Water Quality Monitoring Strategy be approved and integrated into the 10-year work plan for the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program for implementation. 2, that the updated Shawnigan Lake flood maps and supporting technical report and recommendations be adopted. I move those 2 items.
And seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Ms. Legault.
CR2 is the report and recommendations of the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of July 29th.
Director Morrison.
Mr. Chair, report recommend as followed. The following items are for everyone's considerations, 1 through 5. And they will be 1, that a grant aid electoral area D, Cowachen Bay, in the amount of $7,000 be provided to the Cowachen Bay Improvement Association to support an outdoor portal in the village as per the Cowachen Bay charrette. Item 2, that a grant aid electoral area F, Cowachen Lake, South Scots Falls, in the amount of $9,450 to provide the Cowachen Lake District Chamber of Commerce to support the area visitor center for $7,500 and contribute to the area tourism promotional maps for $1,950. Item 3, grant aid electoral area F for exactly the same dollars and same purpose as read in the previous item number 2. Number 4, did I say F? I meant I. Electoral area I, exactly the same as I read out in area F's in number 2. Number 4, that a revised street lighting critical locations policy be approved. Did I say 5 or 4? Number 5, that the Saltaire Park Revitalization Survey report be referred to the Area G Saltaire Community Park Advisory Commission to provide a recommendation on the community engagement process. I move 1 through 5 for all directors.
And that's been seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? I believe, Director Salmon, you were in favor. Your video was just delayed.
In favor, thanks.
Thank you.
Items 6 through 8, Mr. Chair, are for electoral area directors only, and they are number 6, that staff provide a report on options and approaches related to the management of development in the Coaxial Watershed pending results of a watershed study. 7, that development permit number DP20E05 for PID 001194429 be issued. 8, that development variance permit number DVP20E04 for PID 001750798 be issued. I move those 3 items.
Seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
CR3 is the report and recommendations of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of September 2nd.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, these items 1 through 9, I would ask if any of these need to be pulled in the next section. There will need to be a couple of pulled for individual debate due to direction from Legislative Services. So 1 through 9. Seeing no hands in the air. It be recommended, and this is for all directors, that a grant aid electoral area D Cowichan Bay in the amount of $104 be provided to the Shawnigan Residents Association to support Go Local Business and Organization. 2, that a grant aid electoral area C Cobble Hill in the amount of $300 provided to Cowichan beekeepers for creating public educational materials about pollinator identification and backyard beekeeping. 3, grant aid electoral area F, Cowichan Lake, South Scots Falls in the amount of $7,500 be provided to the Kayakuz Volunteer Fire Department to support the provision of services and assist first responder training for the West Cowichan Lake area. 4, that a grant aid electoral area F, Cowichan Lake, South Scots Falls in the amount of $500 be provided to the Lake Cowichan Volunteer Fire Department to support the establishment of a permanent display for historical engine number 1 at the Lake Cowichan Volunteer Fire Department North Shore Road location. 5, that a grant aid electoral area B, Shawnigan Lake in the amount of $6,500 be provided to the Shawnigan's Residents Association for Shawnigan Research Group to bridge water sampling until the water function is further established, and also to cover any related costs for equipment rentals and lab fees. 6, that up to $15,000 be allocated from function 130 electoral feasibility studies for a feasibility study on amalgamation of the Cary, Village, and Carlton water systems. 7, that bylaw number 4328 Saltair Water System Services Loan Authorization Water Treatment Upgrades $3.7 million bylaw 2020 be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings. 8, that a latecomer agreement with the assignee of the owner developer of property at 2391 Mill Bay Road for PID 025923749 to provide for a financial contribution towards the construction costs from properties connecting to the sanitary sewer extension be approved. And 9, that easements FA 30836 and P 96875 registered on parcel D section, well, you can see the legal there at PID 002491265 in favor of Inwood Creek properties be discharged with all discharge costs being borne by the property owners. And I would move items 1 through 9.
Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? Electoral Area Director.
No, all directors.
Sorry, all directors. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Director Morrison, continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Items 10 through 16 and items 12 and 13 will be pulled for individual debate due to an error that needs to be corrected by Ms. Legault. So are there any other items need to be pulled from this section? Director Nicholson put her hand up, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I believe 13 and 16 were the ones that were referred to in the public input period. Is that correct?
Ms. Legault is nodding her head, Mr. Chair.
I believe so, yeah.
So I guess I would like to see 16 pulled as well then, please.
Okay, we'll pull 16 for individual debate. I will start with number 10, that development variance permit number DVP 06 for PID 0005280064 be issued. 11, that development variance permit DVP 20G01 for PID 028862791 be issued. 14, 1, that CVRD bylaw 4302, Couch and Lake South Scotts Falls zoning amendment bylaw PID 012490890 2020 be amended as outlined in the staff report to the September 2nd, 2020 Electoral Area Services Committee on application number RZ18F01. And 2, that CVRD bylaw 4302, Couch and Lake South Scotts Falls zoning amendment bylaw for PID. I think there's a number missing there. Can't be 12490890. Can we have that corrected, or shall I wait on that, Ms. Legault? Has to be read with the correct PID.
I'm just going to look it up. Just a minute, please.
Thank you.
Director Morrison, if I may, it would be the same number as number 1, would it not? 012?
We would hope. Don't want to make a mistake. Don't want to be coming back and rescinding.
I'm sure we do not.
Been there, done that.
Okay, Mr. Chair, it is 012490890.
Thank you. 2020 be forwarded to the board for consideration of second reading as amended. 15, that electoral area F zoning bylaw number 2600 be amended to correct subdivision changed through bylaw number 4257 Coveted, and I move those items.
Thank you. Seconded by Alternate Director Haim, and this is for electoral area directors only. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Director Morrison.
I believe I have to ask Ms. Legault to take 12 and 13 as she has some corrected items. So I guess 12 first, Ms. Legault.
Item 12, there was an error in the permit number, and so it should say that development permit number DP 20E15 for PID 031101755 issued subject to receipt of site survey plan prepared by BC Land Surveyor confirming that the proposed development complies with the siting and parcel coverage regulations within CVRD Electoral Area E.
And I would move that item.
Seconded by Alternate Director Haim. Any discussion on that item? So just for the correction, I'll call the question. Electoral area directors only. All those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Director Morrison.
Turn to Ms. Legault for the correction in number 13.
Number 13 is 2 corrections, one to the application number, so it should read RZ19G01 with a PID of 026872944.
Thank you. And if we can finish.
So I'll read that one out if you wish. The application number RZ19G01 for PID 026872944 be denied, and a partial refund provided in accordance with the CVRD's development application procedures and fees bylaw. I will move that item.
Thank you. Are those multiple seconders or is that questions? Sorry, Director Marsh, we need to see if we get a seconder before we go to discussion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Director Smith, is that a second? All right, discussion. I'll go to Director Acton and Director Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I believe that this is one of the letters that came to us from the applicant. And I was trying, it's really confusing when we don't have the address on there and we're not sure which one. So then when I went back to try and find the actual report in the applicant from Electoral Area Services, it's hard to see even tell if I pulled up the right one. So this person mentioned a few items that seemed quite logical that there were a couple points that I don't remember coming up at Electoral Area Services. So I think for our due diligence, we should either look at this again or bring it back. It's to the will of the committee, because I think that was one of the ones with them that we should have looked at that could have been, we missed maybe a couple points. So is there a will of the committee to maybe send it back to Electoral Area Services? Am I the only one here that sees there's a possible error? Or at least we didn't give them a fair look at their whole application?
So that would be...
I would move to refer back if I have a seconder.
And that's been seconded by Director Nicholson. Ms. Legault, can you please provide clarity on what application this is? Because with the wrong PID, et cetera, I'm not sure I'm clear on it. And again, this is for electoral area directors only, but I think we should have clarity on what we're discussing.
This property is on Whitecap Place.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go to, so this is on a motion to refer. I'll come back to the speakers list unless this is on the motion to refer back to committee. Okay, Director Marsh, and then I have Director Nicholson. And again, this is electoral areas directors.
So I don't think I understood your boundary. I know I can't vote on it. Are you saying I can't speak on it?
No, you can speak on it. That's the prerogative of members of the board, but we are unable to vote on it, so.
No, I know I can't vote on it, but I feel that surely part of the reason of the Cowichan Valley Regional District is that there are checks and balances between the board. And so I am not sure if this is one of those two letters that Angie read. Sorry,
Ms. Legault just clarified this is Whitecap Place. This is Mr. Gill.
But okay, so I don't remember the details of that one. I just remember the details of the two.
This is one of the two. This is the letter from Mr. Gill.
Right. Okay, well, I guess it's no, I personally, I think that if there's ever a question, things should be sent back and had another look, but I can't vote, so that's all I'll say.
Thank you. Director Nicholson, did you want to speak on the referral?
I just asked everybody that's not speaking mutes. There's someone that's not muted and there's a lot of background noise coming in. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. So if we have no more discussion on the referral, this is the Whitecap Road application, and this is a motion to refer back to electoral area services. And so this will be a vote for is a referral motion electoral area directors only as well? On land use? Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? So I've got alternate director Haim, directors Wilson, Morrison, Yanni DiNardo, and Smith opposed. The referral motion fails. So we're back to, I believe, the motion has been moved and seconded. When I say it with a question mark at the end, I was just looking for confirmation. Thank you. And any further discussion on the motion then? Seeing none, all those in favor? And opposed. Directors Nicholson, Salmon, Kuhn, opposed, and Acton opposed. The motion carries. All right, so back to you, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that takes us to item 16, and that is the other application that was referred to in the public input, and it is that the application number RZ20G01 for PID 003067327 be denied and a partial refund be provided in accordance with CVRD's development application procedures and fees bylaw, and I would move that item. You're muted.
Sorry, that was seconded by Director Smith. Is there any discussion? Director Acton.
Thank you. So this one actually had a lot more points that I think we should be careful about. The applicant was not able to be there. It was actually suggested that it be approved by staff, and so they didn't show up. So I think we should give them the opportunity to speak to us as a committee when they actually stated that there would be hardship if this is something that couldn't happen for them later on in the future. We are moving towards people wanting suites. We are moving towards people wanting higher density. So I think we should at least hear what they have to say. And yeah, we talk so many times here about helping each other and supporting each other and helping our citizens. And this sounds like one that perhaps we should take a second look at, because if we're actually sending them down on some hardship, I'd like to move to refer it back to committee so that we can just have a discussion. It sounds like I did actually find that one from our agenda from last week. They put a lot of work into it and spent a lot of money producing a lot of reports. So I think we owe them that much for them to come speak to us, or at least on Zoom. Thank you. Motion to refer. Back to Electoral Area Services, and that's seconded by Director Nicholson. So this is the family with the disabled daughter. Is there any further discussion on the referral? Director Marsh.
You know, each time I speak to something that is electoral area services, I wonder if I'm swaying the vote the other way because of people feeling I don't have a right to speak on it. But having a family member with severe challenges and knowing that in this province at this time, the majority of the burden falls on the family, not just financially, but to give care and all of that thing, everything, and how much of a toll it can take, not just on the family, but on the individual with the developmental delay or whatever disability. I think, and then hearing that staff recommended that this pass, it's a little surprising that the committee, I don't understand what basis it would not take its own staff's advice, but I know I can't vote, and I hope that you're all mature enough to decide between yourselves and not, write it off just because I'm not allowed to vote.
Point of order, propriety of referral, please.
Well, I don't think I can talk about that because I can't vote. So can I?
I thought you were finishing your comments anyway.
I'm sorry?
Director Morrison raised a point of order on the propriety of referral. So you started speaking about the referral and then started going into discussing the application. So this is on the appropriateness of referring it back to committee for further discussion.
But can I speak on that, just?
Yes, you can. You started speaking on it, but then you went into discussing the merits of the application, which is not appropriate for referral motion. So that's what the point of order was raised, and I would uphold the point of order based on the propriety of referral. So if you're speaking to the appropriateness of referring it back to electoral area services for further discussion, that would be appropriate at this time. So
that's
referral.
What I was doing, but I do get a little bit verbose, but that's what I thought I was doing.
But then you started arguing the merits of the application, which is not a propriety of the referral. And that's
okay, I apologize.
No problem. Did you have any more comments on the propriety of the referral?
I just think that it should have another look.
Thank you. I believe I saw Director Salmon's hand.
Yes, thank you. And I always appreciate hearing Director Marsh. I agree with Director Ack, and it felt to me like we've got new information here, so I would support sending this back to have another look.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the referral? Then this is for electoral area directors only. I'll call the Director Smith on the referral.
Thank you. I believe that we had a good discussion during the 2nd of September regarding the accessory dwellings in regards to Area G, that Area G does have in their official community plan the allows secondary suites that includes additional single family dwelling. Secondary suites encourage affordable rental and special needs housing.
I'm going to cut off Director Morrison's point of order because, again, now you're discussing the merits of the application, not the appropriateness of the referral. Discussing points about the application, the reasons for denial, not the reasons for referral. So sorry, Director Morrison, I understand your intent was a point of order. Thank you. So I think everybody's got an idea of what their perspective is on this application. I would just appreciate being able to call the motion to refer back to EASC. Thank you. All those in favor? And opposed? We have Director Smith and Haim opposed. Motion to refer carries. It will be referred back to electoral area services. So we're moving on. Director Morrison.
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on, Ms. Legault.
Thank you. CR4 is the report and recommendations of the Community Services Committee meeting of this afternoon. Director Acton.
Thank you. I'm only using one device here. So from this afternoon, we have number one, that a grant application be submitted to ICIP Community Culture Recreation Infrastructure Program for the following projects at the Cowichan Performing Arts Center: partial house seating replacements, new orchestra pit seating, renovation of the public washrooms, concession with the CVRD share of up to $242,000 to be funded from the Function 420 Cowichan Community Center annual contribution to reserves. Number two, that a grant application be submitted to the ICIP Community Culture Recreation Infrastructure Program for the following projects: LC Miles roof replacement and replacement of windows and the gymnasium floor at the Shawnee Lake Community Center with a CVRD share of up to $94,000 funded from Function 464 through short-term borrowing or reserve funds. That a grant application be submitted to the ICIP Community Culture and Recreation Infrastructure Program for the following projects at the Cowichan Lake Sports Arena: replacement of the arena refrigeration condenser and exterior arena complex, cladding with the CVRD share of up to $175,000 funded from the Function 405 Cowichan Lake Recreation Capital Reserve Fund and through short-term borrowing. And number two, one, that a public expression of interest be issued for community policing service delivery in North Cowichan, the City of Duncan, Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, in accordance with the annual budgeted requisition amount for Function 496 and scope of services outlined by the CVRD. And two, that the scope of services outlined in the EOI include speed watch, block watch, neighborhood watch, citizens on patrol, volunteer recruitment, recognition and training, youth engagement, seniors engagement, social media presence in coordination with the RCMP, community engagement, overall crime reduction as the core mandate for the Cowichan Community Policing function. And I so move those items.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion on those that we didn't have earlier today? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, Director Acton. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to staff reports. Item SR1 is a staff report from Legislative Services on the electoral area H by-election appointment of Chief Election Officer and Deputy Chief Election Officer. And before I read the recommendation, I'm just going to note that staff have been in contact with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing on ways to enhance safety of a voting opportunity during the pandemic. And staff will be seeking some ministerial orders to enhance safety, including the ability to take verbal or oral declarations and to expand the use of mail ballot voting. So you will be hearing more about this in the future, as the board will actually need to endorse the order once we receive it from the ministry. But the proposed recommendation is that Angie Legault be appointed Chief Election Officer for the electoral area H North Oyster Diamond by-election. 2, that Kathleen Harrison be appointed Deputy Chief Election Officer for the area H North Oyster Diamond by-election. And that Saturday, November 28th, 2020 be set as general voting day for the by-election.
Thank you. Moved by Director Haim, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any further discussion? Director McGonigal, or I'll go to Director Haim and then Director McGonigal.
Thank you. This has been a long time coming. It certainly wasn't expected to take this long, but I think electoral area H deserves elected representation. So hopefully on November the 28th, that's what will happen.
Sounds good. Thank you. Director McGonigal.
I'd just like to welcome electoral area H to the secret silly season 2.0. Halfway through the term, we're going to try this again. We have also received our ministerial order with added implementations of mail-in ballots, etc. So I look forward to that ministerial order coming forward and see what they have to say about the regional districts by-election as well.
Thank you. Director Acton.
Thank you. I'm curious, Ms. Legault, when would candidates have to put their name forward then?
Report. I don't have the date.
Oh, I didn't see it in the report. Nomination
period would be October 13th to 23rd.
Only that time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? I'm glad nobody opposes the pursuit of democracy. That motion carries. Moving on, Ms. Legault.
Item SR2 is a staff report from the Manager of Economic Development regarding the Tourism Board Couch appointment. The recommendation for consideration is that 1, that Barry O'Riordan be appointed to represent the Cowichan Valley Regional District on the Board of Tourism Cowichan, and 2, that a letter be sent to Tourism Cowichan Society requesting they update their bylaws to be consistent with the Regional Tourism Contribution Agreement, which expires September 30th, 2020.
Thank you. Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Marsh. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Moving on, Ms. Legault.
Item SR3 is the staff report from the Manager Economic Development Division regarding the Cowichan COVID-19 Business Survey number 2 results. The report's for information, and I believe Mr. O'Riordan has an introduction.
Mr. O'Riordan, welcome. Your microphone is on, but we cannot hear you. Hopefully, I'm assuming you don't have IT support at hand. My guess is that the default audio device is not the headset. But I can't provide you tech support on chairing the meeting. Try disconnecting your headset and you may get audio through your built-in microphone, or...
I had just tried that.
There you go. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. So today I'm accompanied by my colleague, Brittany Taylor, Economic Development Analyst, who joined EDC on August 19th, and who completed much of the analysis in this report. So we're very glad to have an economic development analyst on board after 1 year of the seat being empty, this new position. So as highlighted in the report, Survey 2 was conducted between August 5th and 19th, 2020, and for convenience is presented alongside data from other provincial and regional data sources. This report looks to provide an update since Survey 1 in May, while providing some additional data analysis. The report reveals a modest improvement in economic activity since May, with revenues and employment up, yet 55% of businesses are still experiencing revenue drops compared with pre-COVID levels. It was 77% in May. And also unemployment remains high. In Cowichan, 30% of businesses identified in this report are planning to close, sell, retire, or reduce the size or scope of their business operations in the next year, which is phenomenal. At the same time, Cowichan businesses are innovating, particularly in terms of seeking to engage with the digital economy, but also the introduction of new services. 12% of businesses, in fact, plan to expand their businesses in the next year. So we have some mixed results there. Overall, while there have been gains in the regional economy is not expected to return to pre-COVID levels in the foreseeable future. And EDC has taken the results of this survey into consideration in its work in 2020, as well as planning for 2021 activities. Likewise, the results of the survey will inform the work of other economic development organizations within the region. I don't know if my colleague Brittany Taylor would like to add anything that I haven't covered in this kind of high-level overview.
I think you've covered it pretty well, Barry. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I welcome any questions from the board on this.
Thank you. I'll look for any speakers. I just want to comment that I appreciate the report and the detail there. And, you know, it seems to echo anecdotally the conversations that we're having with people on sort of what we call Main Street, you know, in the business community, when we meet in different committees and groups that are sort of offshoots of some of these initiatives. It does seem to echo some of those more sort of broad anecdotal themes. So I do appreciate the work. Any questions or comments from the members of the board? Director Morrison.
Thank you. And well, you may not have, through you, Mr. Chair, Barry, you may not have covered this specifically, but as even though we've all suffered in this region and many regions the effects of COVID-19, there's been some bright spots, and we won't mention tubing, will we, Director McGonigal? But there has been some bright spots in some of the economic fortunes of some of the companies in the West Cowichan region that have been benefiting from the be a tourist in your hometown and in your own community. So some businesses have been doing quite well, but I think there's some pretty gloomy clouds on the horizon when it comes to things like commercial real estate, the trend to having employees working at home. We're even hearing stories of people that were going to buy 1 and 2 bedroom townhouses are now buying 3 or 4 bedroom homes just to have those additional office spaces available in their homes to work remotely. So I guess my question is, it's more about the fact we have built brick and mortar infrastructure in hotels and in office buildings and in structures that have been the traditional place of the business activity. And now we're starting to see people work in other modes and in other environments. And I don't know if you've seen any statistics on how the Airbnb business has fallen pretty darn flat in a lot of areas. We're looking at having to address that in our HOCP and MOCP. Have you heard any information in the course of doing the surveys as to the impacts on our real estate industry and how that's going to affect business?
Yeah, real estate really isn't covered in the scope of the survey undertaken. Now, we are looking to what other regions have done in terms of recovery dashboards, like South Island Prosperity Partnership has done, which would have a lot more economic indicators, including real estate and BC ferry trips and airport travel, etc. And that is something that we are starting we're beginning to work on. So you will see some more broader level indicators that will speak to some of those questions.
Director Morrison? That's good. Okay, thank you. I think I have Director Staples next. Did I miss anyone else? Go ahead, Director Staples.
Thank you, Chair Stone. Thanks for doing this next survey. It's interesting to just sort of see where things were a couple of months ago and how quickly they've turned, just 2 months later. And I'm really looking forward to the ongoing surveys that you're going to be doing to just sort of follow what's happening. It's really important that we understand. I hear from businesses. There's a lot of businesses, not a lot, but there seems to be a percentage of businesses who are deciding to retire. We're already seeing that downtown. We had a couple of businesses that were planning on retiring that decided to retire a bit early due to COVID, and also some businesses that are expanding because of it. So I just think it's really interesting to be able to, and really appreciate that you're doing this so that we can actually track that and sort of see how things change. And the different ways that this has both positive and negative as we move forward. And it will also help us be able to have better discussions about, what we can do, not just at the regional district, but in our own jurisdictions as things progress and as we see what's happening. So thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. Any more discussion from the board? I just want to thank you again for Barry and for all of the people involved in these initiatives and all the respondents to the survey. An observation that I have as a business owner was that supply has been a major challenge as well. And we just, in the last 2 weeks, have seen a dramatic return of supply being available to our business. So hopefully that's echoed through some other business sectors, especially retail, that have difficulty not with getting customers because there seems to be pent up demand, but actually getting the products to be able to sell to the customers. So hopefully that's a sign of good things to come and more improvement. But thank you again for all your work and helping us build all that information. And we'll obviously be having further discussion soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Legault, moving on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item SR4 is a staff report from the General Manager Land Use Services regarding board commission meetings during the COVID-19 public health emergency. The recommendation for consideration is that Resolution 20-292 be rescinded, and 2, that CVRD commission meetings during the COVID-19 public health emergency be held either electronically or in person as determined by staff in consultation with the chair of the commission on a case-by-case basis, subject to the following. A, in-person commission meetings are required to be held in accordance with provincial orders and WorkSafe BC guidelines in a location with a compliant facility safety plan. And B, all commission meetings for the purpose of considering development applications are required to be held in a format that allows applicants to present their views and to hear and respond to a commission's deliberations.
Thank you. Is that moved by Director Yanni DiNardo and seconded by Director Wilson? Any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed. Nice to see you, Ms. Charles, even though it's only briefly. Ms. Legault, we'll move on to the next item.
Mr. Chair, item SR5 is a staff report from Development Services Division regarding application RZ19C03, Cedars at Cobble Hill, and the recommendation is that CVRD Bylaw 4291, Electoral Area C, South Couch and Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 3741, Holland Avenue, 2019, and CVRD Bylaw number 4292, Electoral Areas A and C, South Couch and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 3741, Holland Avenue, 2019, be amended to correct the legal description and be considered for second reading as amended. And the bylaws will appear later on the agenda.
Thank you. Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Morrison. Is this, Ms. Legault, is this a land use item only, or is this just a correction so it's all board members?
This is a land use issue.
So it's electoral area directors only. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Thank you for that, Ms. Legault.
Thank you. We're on to bylaws for electoral area directors. Item BEA1, that second reading of CVRD bylaw number 4291, Electoral Area C, South Cowichan Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw 3741 Holland Avenue 2019 be rescinded.
And that's moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Wilson, or I think. Okay. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? And opposed? And opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
And CVRD bylaw 4291, Electoral Area C, South Cowichan Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw 3741 Holland Avenue 2019 for second reading as amended.
Director Wilson, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
BEA2, second reading of CVRD bylaw 4292, Electoral Areas A and C, South Cowichan Zoning Amendment bylaw 3741 Holland Avenue 2019 be rescinded.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Unopposed, motion carries. Sorry, I can't help myself. It's just habit. Ms. Legault.
CVRD bylaw 4292, Electoral Areas A and C, South Cowichan Zoning Amendment bylaw 3741 Holland Avenue 2019 for second reading as amended.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Nicholson. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
BEA3, CVRD bylaw 4335, South Cowichan Zoning Amendment bylaw 2020 for first and second readings.
Looking for a mover? Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
CVRD bylaw 4336, Electoral Area I, Yubo Mead Creek Zoning Amendment bylaw 2020 for first and second reading.
Moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Morrison. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
This is the item of new business, NB1, CVRD bylaw 4328, Saltaire Water System Service Loan Authorization, Water Treatment Plant Upgrades, $3.7 million, bylaw 2020 for first, second, and third readings.
Thank you. Moved by Director Smith, seconded by Director Kuhn. Sorry, I'm running out of gas here in a hurry. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault, I believe that takes us down to question period.
It does, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to bring up my email here. We have one submission from Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Mr. Chair, could this board give a written order to the staff to attach addresses to PIDs so everyone knows what is being voted on, pulled, or referred? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're supposed to be doing that as practice, and I will say I was refreshed when the bylaws came up that the civic addresses were on there. I'm not sure if we can take that as I see a lot of nodding heads. I don't see any no's. Do we need a motion to request that, Ms. Legault, or can staff take that under advisement? Or Ms. Charolf, when it comes to the land use applications, that we include the civic address?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll look at it. A civic address isn't always available, but we will look at our options.
Okay, thank you very much. Director McGonigal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to reach out and thank staff for guiding us through a very long and arduous day. I appreciate you getting us through this 12-hour episode almost, and for sticking around and guiding us to the end. Thank you. And to all the chairs, including myself.
I was going to say, you took off, you thanked staff. I was going to thank all of you for mostly good humor through a very long and difficult day, but well, hopefully I'll see you soon in passing, socially distant, or of course here on WebEx or other forms of online engagement. So with that, Ms. Legault, I believe that we can ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Director Smith, seconded by Director Nicholson. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. And as Dennis Miller would have said in the old days, we're out of here. Good night, you guys.